This Tanach video is sponsored by Nathan Kirsch in loving memory of his parents, Rachel Bat Mordechai and Yehuda Pesach ben Naftali Cohen. So this coming December 24th, our Beit Midrash will be having a Tanach in a Day program. We'll be spending the day exploring the books of Tanach, trying to familiarize ourselves with the basic themes and basic values that emerge from each of the books in Tanach. Now, because most of us are familiar with the stories of Chumash, the majority of our day will be devoted to the stories in Nevi'im and Ktuvim. And for Chumash, we will devote only an hour shir at the beginning. While most of us know the stories of Chumash, and we've started reading it again only 2 weeks ago, we tend to think of the Parshiot as individual units, because that's we read them each week. We focus on a Parsha and the stories within that Parsha. But because of the way we read it, we often forget or often overlook the fact that Torah isn't divided just into Parshiot, but it's divided into Chumashim. It's divided into 5 books. And each book has a theme that runs through the book, a spine that ties the book together and really gives it an overarching idea, an overarching theme that adds meaning to our experience as Jews. And trying to understand those themes is important if we want to have an overarching vision of what Judaism is all about. So, for example, Sefer Breshit discusses how God went from choosing all of humanity to directly serve Him to deciding that wasn't going to work, and instead He was going to choose a family, the children of Avram, and then eventually Yitzchak and Yaakov, culminating with the 12 Shvatim. He was going to choose a family who were going to be His ambassadors to the rest of the world. Sefer Shemot discusses the story of that family as it becomes a nation, as it goes down to Egypt, it emerges from Egypt, it's given the Torah. Vayikra discusses how the Jewish people can become close to God in the confines of the Mishkan, in the confines of the Mikdash. Sefer Bamidbar discusses how God expresses His closeness to the Jewish people in everyday life as they travel. And each book really has a theme. And trying to understand those themes, and not just those themes, but the relationship between the different books is critical. So, for example, as we mentioned, Sefer Breshit discusses God's original plan for the world, where He was going to directly interact with humanity as a whole without any chosen family or chosen people. Sefer Shemot tells the story of His chosen people. The question then becomes, okay, well, what's the relationship between Breshit and Shemot? And Rabbi Chaim Angel notes that you could take this in 2 very different ways. One could say that God's original plan for humanity was that He would have all of humanity serve Him, but then God gave up on that plan entirely and decided to devote His energy to developing a nation who would serve Him. And then you would see a complete break between the ethos of Breshit and the ethos of Shemot. Alternatively, one could say no, that the goal of Breshit and Shemot are the same, namely that all of humanity should serve God. The question isn't a question of goal, the question is one of method, of means. In Breshit, God originally wanted to directly have all of humanity serve Him without any intermediary, without any ambassador, without any teachers. And then he came to the conclusion, after some failed attempts, so to speak, that He needed to have a nation who would teach the rest of the world. And therefore He chose a nation of teachers, Bnei Yisrael, who would impart His message to humanity. But the goal was still the same, that eventually all of humanity would come to serve Him. And we find many indications in Navi that that is God's vision for the Messianic era, that all of humanity will serve Him. But the Jewish people will act as the teachers. The Beit HaMikdash will be the focal point of world religion, and we will act as a model nation to teach other nations how to serve God. But that question of whether Breshit is replaced with Shemot in terms of end goals, or does Shemot represent a different tact by God to reach the same goal, that question is a fundamental one to how we understand Judaism, and really emerges from the question of what is the relationship between Sefer Breshit and Sefer Shemot. So our goal, I think, as we learn Chumash, starting again, as we now begin Kriyat Torah again for this year, is to try not just to focus on the stories of each parasha, but to try to see the bigger picture in each sefer and try to see the themes that emerge from the Torah as a whole. And if you come back on December 24th and join us for our Tanach in a Day, we will try to explore some of those themes and how the 5 books of Chumash work together to develop these ideas, develop these fundamental philosophy of Torah and this guide for how we're supposed to live our lives as Jews. So I hope to see all of you on December 24th when we learn all of Tanakh in one day. For more details, please see the flyer at the end of this video and the links below.